Once upon a time, there was an enormous garden warmed by the brilliant sun, where the wind whispered the sweetest songs, and colourful butterflies danced. Right in the middle of this garden, snug beneath the soft, brown soil, lay a tiny seed. His name was Barnaby. Barnaby was a sunflower seed. He was small, perfectly round, and had black and white stripes just like a pair of pajamas. The underground was like a cosy bed for him, but Barnaby had a very big problem. He was the most impatient seed in the whole wide world. It had only been exactly 5 days since Barnaby was planted in the soil. But if you asked him, he felt as though he had been there for years. "I want to grow up now," shouted Barnaby from the dark earth. "I want to be a sunflower with massive, bright yellow petals, touching the sky. And I want it right this minute." Barnaby squeezed his tiny eyes shut, tightened his little body, pushed, and shoved upwards. HNNNG. Unning. But nothing happened. He was still just a tiny, round seed. "Why aren't I growing? Why haven't my magical leaves popped out?" he grumbled. Chapter 2, Archibald the Wise Worm and the Rushed Wish. Just then, a wise worm named Archibald, who was wriggling his way through the soil, heard his voice. Archibald adjusted his little red spectacles and smiled kindly. Everyone under the ground knew Archibald. He was the cleverest resident in the garden. "Hello, little Barnaby," said Archibald in a gentle voice. "Why are you in such a rush? Can't you see how wonderful it is to take your time?" "Because I want to see the world up there, Archibald," said Barnaby, trying impatiently to bounce. "I want to hear the birds singing and touch the clouds. Why am I still under the ground?" Archibald slowly shook his head. "Growing is a magical journey, Barnaby. And magic takes time. Before you reach up to the sky, you must reach downwards. First, you must send your roots deep, deep down. If your roots aren't strong, even the tiniest puff of wind will easily knock you over. You must be patient. You must learn to wait." But Barnaby didn't want to wait. "Patience is so boring. I don't want roots, I want leaves," he sulked. Chapter 3, The Rain and the Sun's Turn. The next day, grey clouds covered the sky. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter. Raindrops slowly began to fall onto the soil. The water trickled through the earth right down to Barnaby. The soil smelled absolutely lovely. Barnaby drank the water greedily. "Brilliant! I've had my water, now I'm definitely going to turn into a giant flower," he thought excitedly. He waited. He waited 1 minute. He waited 5 minutes. But he still wasn't a flower. He was just a slightly plumper seed. "I thought I was going to grow. The rain didn't work," he sighed crossly. Just then, Dotty the ladybird, who was resting on a blade of grass just above the soil, heard him. Dotty had exactly 5 black spots on her shiny red wings. She leaned over and called down to Barnaby through a crack in the earth. "Hello, little seed," cheered Dotty. "Rain on its own isn't enough, sweetheart. The sun needs to warm you up and wake you from your sleep, too. Everything happens in its own good time. Barnaby let out a massive sigh. Time, time, time. There were so many rules. A few days later, the clouds cleared away, and Mr. Sun sent his golden, toasty rays down into the garden. The soil warmed up, getting warmer and warmer, feeling just like a cozy blanket. Suddenly, Barnaby felt a funny tickle inside him. A tiny green shoot began to stretch up from his head. Pop! It poked through the soil and came out into the open air. Hooray! I finally did it! I am a giant sunflower, shouted Barnaby with joy. But when he looked around, he had a huge shock. He wasn't a giant sunflower at all. He was just a teeny-tiny shoot with 2 little green leaves. Even the grass next to him was taller. His eyes filled with tears. I wanted to be a giant. Why am I so small? Dotty the ladybird fluttered over and landed on one of Barnaby's tiny leaves. Little steps, Barnaby, whispered Dotty. No great tree or giant flower grows overnight. You will get a little bit stronger every single day. Chapter 4, The Great Storm and a Little Shoot. That night, a terribly fierce storm brewed in the garden. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sky lit up with lightning, and the thunder crashed with a mighty bang. The wind blew so hard that the towering, incredibly tall flowers in the garden were tossed from side to side. The branches of the big trees creaked, and the tall roses bent down in fright. But what about Barnaby? Barnaby was so small, and during those 5 days of waiting, he had gripped the soil so tightly with his roots, that the wind couldn't hurt him at all. The wind simply rushed right over him like a gentle breeze. The earth held him tightly and kept him safe. At that moment, Barnaby finally understood what Archibald the wise worm had meant. If I had been impatient and grown into a very tall flower straight away, my weak roots wouldn't have been able to hold me, and I would have snapped in this storm, he thought. Being small and waiting has protected me. Chapter 5, The Magic of Waiting and the Golden Crown. From that day on, Barnaby stopped rushing. He realized that waiting wasn't actually boring, it was a wonderful chance to discover the world around him. Every morning, he watched the sunrise. He listened to the sound the wind made rustling through his leaves. At night, he looked up at the sky and counted the twinkling stars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When it rained, he played games with the water droplets, and he had long chats with Dotty the ladybird. He truly enjoyed the time it took to grow. Days turned into weeks. Every day, Barnaby grew a little bit taller, his green stem grew thicker, and his leaves grew enormous. And then, one warm summer morning, Barnaby opened his eyes and felt that something was different. There was something large, heavy, and velvety soft on his head. Slowly, just like a stretching cat, it opened up. He had gigantic, bright yellow petals that shone just like the sun. He was no longer a tiny, impatient seed. He was the tallest, brightest, and most beautiful sunflower in the whole garden. The birds came to land on his broad shoulders and sang their loveliest songs. Arthur the butterfly danced all around him. Archibald the wise worm called up from the soil below, "You look absolutely splendid, Barnaby. Was it worth the wait?" Barnaby smiled a huge smile, turned his beautiful yellow petals towards the warm sun, and said, "Yes, Archibald. The magic just needed a little bit of time. And waiting was just as beautiful as growing up." From that day on, Barnaby told his story to all the new, tiny seeds that blew into the garden on the wind. He whispered to them not to rush, but to take a deep breath and enjoy the sun, the rain, and every single moment. Because the most beautiful things in the world always grow with patience.